Yep. So next one we've got here, what does bimodal IT mean in a New Zealand context?
What does it mean in any context?
Yes. I mean, this is, I understand, a term that Gartner dreamed up or come up with, and this idea of basically you split your IT department in two effectively. One using the traditional approach, meaning that it's going to be it's going to change slowly. It's a system of record, has to be super accurate, etc., which is in the mode 1 they talk about, and the mode 2 is your sexy new mobile, fast-moving part of IT. And I don't know whether it actually helps the organisation, apart from maybe separating a split down the how do you decide which side things are in for one point, and there's also these massive interdependencies often between the sorts of things you want to do in the sort of mode 2 space and what's needed to be happening in the mode 1 space to support that stuff. So and it sort of doesn't say how does it develop over time. I know. It could be a temporary situation as you try to deal with the demands of the sort of or the expectations that people have with mobile applications, etc., in mode 2 space. But you don't want to I don't think you'd want your IT organisation to have that sort of bimodal, or I'd almost call it bipolar, structure, going forward.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I have a feeling that if an organisation is purely and only in mode 1, they're going to be overtaken by competition and become irrelevant very quickly, because this world is about speed to react to the market. That is today's world. What is going to happen tomorrow, we all don't know, because it's such a fast-moving beast. But being in mode 1 only, or having a mode 1 piece of an organisation, seems so much overkill, and it seems to me a sure way to fail.
Yeah, I agree. I think, bimodal is definitely what is out there. I see a lot of it. I see core systems, which are the systems of record, as you said, Bill, and then they're surrounded by other bits that are maybe the systems of interaction or customer engagement or whatever you want to call it. But then often there's a handoff, there's a disjunction between those two where it's all good, you get this lovely interactive thing going on, and then at some point we come to a screeching halt, and in fact you get a paper form to fill in, and you scan that and send that as an email or something, and then it gets picked up internally and popped into the system of record. So you sort of get things like that going on, and I think that's good enough for now for some organisations, but in a competitive situation, those organisations that have digitised their core are going to have an advantage. They're going to be able to offer. They're going to offer a seamless end-to-end transaction, a deep transaction, and I think that's powerful and important.
Yeah,
bimodal seems to, doesn't seem to acknowledge that, or.
Well, I think what they need to acknowledge in there more is that bimodal is a transitional state that an organisation will live in for a while until they're fully adopted the digital world and become an agile organisation through and through, so that they can compete in this world. It's the only way to survive, really.
Yeah. I don't know why Gartner. I'm not sure how they pitch it exactly, but to pitch it as a way of it's a categorization, which is true. You could take over an organization and categorize their systems into mode 1 and mode 2. That's fine, but it's not a desirable place to be. And ideally, all your systems would be mode 1 type, operating, and that would be ideally where you're moving. Unfortunately, over time, if you set up the sort of recognition of a mode 1 and mode 2, the problem would be that over time your mode 1 grows bigger as things that are developed in mode 2. They in 5 years' time, are they going to be then sitting in mode 1? And all that happens is that your mode 1 space gets bigger, where you want actually the reverse to occur. You want to be moving things out of mode 1 into mode 2, and that's going to require active projects, active investments, and all the rest of it.
I agree completely. You look at an outfit and like a Netflix, for example. I know it's easy to pick those internet those ones, but can you imagine being viable, with a chunk of it being mode 2. A chunk of it being mode 1.
Yeah.
I mean, what they've essentially got is the deep properties of mode 1, in the sense that they've got something that's super reliable, high availability, high resilience, all those things. And in fact, they're doing that chaos monkey thing to constantly push the system and test it. But at the same time, it's clear that they're able to be very agile, and they're able to introduce things and change, respond to business changes. So it's the best of both.
Yep.
And I think that really should be the objective.
I guess being devil's advocate a little bit here, and again in a New Zealand context, is it more practical to take this approach though? When we see organisations who are adopting approaches such as SAFE, probably more so than something like LESS, and is that partly because they can make that happen more easily without significant change to their organisation? Because it's SAFE seems to work more well in the existing structures of an organisation compared to LESS, which is moving quite a lot more to a pure Scrum approach on an enterprise scale. Is bimodal a pragmatic approach for New Zealand organisations?
That's a good question, Brendon. And the whole, the position of like the SAFE agile framework against the less agile framework. I'd say that from my reading of it, a large organisations with a commitment or a large investment in traditional type applications that are sort of living in the mode 1 space, you'll probably find the SAFE framework for doing agile development, should I say, SAFE, and that they can map. It seems to map almost to their existing structures. There's a lot of roles in SAFE that people can, enterprise architects, there's systems architects, there's portfolios of projects and all that stuff. You can sort of say, oh yes, it's sort of just it looks pretty similar, and there's the Scrum part and SAFE sort of sits down in the bottom left-hand corner, sort of happens at the bottom level, tucked away. Whereas LESS is more radical, but I'd say if done well, probably actually make the organisation really more agile, because effectively it does try to form very close linkages at the top level of the organisation. The executive management, the marketplace they're working in, the demands for the organisation and the environment, and it tries to make very close connections between that at the top and the actual Scrum teams doing the work, if you like, at the bottom, for lack of a better term, but the actual doers, with not a lot of disintermediation occurring. They try to basically short circuit what used to be the realm of middle managers and coordinators and all that. But when you look at the SAFE framework, you do tend to see a lot of these intermediary roles, which sits between that connection of the of the executives and the demand of the organisation at the top and the doers, people doing the work at the bottom. It's a real spectrum. But I wonder whether maybe going straight to a LESS type structure in an organisation could be quite a radical change. And how you would implement it, I don't know. And possibly SAFE could be a stepping stone, if you like, from going from really traditional, go to SAFE, and then ultimately move to something more like LESS.
But pulling us back to bimodal, isn't it the same kind of argument? Like, you could see that it could be attractive to organisations, even if transition. It's not, possibly as a transition, even if it's not necessarily the right thing for them to get the ultimate prize, if you like. You can see that it could be attractive to some organisations.
Well, at least it explicitly acknowledges the need for velocity in part of the organisation's IT.
Yeah, I was wondering about the while Bill was talking about the composition of IT teams throughout sort of the New Zealand landscape, and you look at that and you say, well, a lot of the practitioners are of an age that were grown up in traditional activities, and it will be hard, although IT is sort of all about changing the business and changing technology and introducing new stuff. Changing selves is kind of difficult. And people find it very hard to move away from the traditional techniques and methods and structures into an agile environment, whether it's safe or whether it is less. It doesn't matter. It'll be changing themselves and reinventing ourselves, if you like, will be a difficult task until such time that the Z generation is starting to make really its way into this industry and are expecting to see just mode 2.
Sure.
You with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There is that sort of, that concept of the book Management 3.0, and it talks about I guess your first Management 1.0 was effectively your classic command and control and coordination, top-down stuff, which you're all sort of familiar with.
Yeah.
Version 2, it talks about essentially, when things got harder, it was basically model 1 or version 1 of management, but just work harder and work longer, and more control and more coordination was sort of pushed down, trying to deal with the environment. And now we've got version 3, which basically is this idea of mixed team, multidisciplinary, self-managing teams. And that sort of ties in. It's so important, that sort of a concept and the values like that, tying in, to doing agile effectively in the organisation. And reinventing is a good point. I think the term there, reinventing ourselves. Those of us who've maybe been in the industry a while, looking through all this information on these topics and trying to sort out the wheat from the chaff, and how to pragmatically, apply it, is a big part of the rails we find ourselves in.
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned this because in a couple of my clients that I've serviced over the past, it was very clear that the Z generation is trying to push for these new methodologies. They're expecting it to be there and they're expecting everybody to understand it. Yet the older generation, sort of my generation, I guess, is resisting that because it is a change, and it is kind of how do we accept that it is necessary to move from mode 1 to mode 2, going into a DevOps sort of state, really changing our ways, if you like. And again, I'll use the word reinvent, and maybe that's what this is all about. The older generation needs to give up their own values and start thinking in a lean way, I guess.